Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners Spring 2022 Investor Conference. My name is Robert Breza, Vice President of Lytham Partners. During this presentation, we welcome CEO Philip Young from Lobe Sciences. We will engage in a fireside chat today, like a Q&A session after a brief presentation. During this presentation, Phil from Lobe Sciences, ticker symbol LOBE on the Canadian Stock Exchange, the CSE, and LOBEF on the OTCQB. Before we begin, for those not familiar with Lytham Partners, it's one of the country's leading investor relations firm with more than 2 decades of corporate access experience. We have built one of the most industrial, diverse, effective platforms for communicating small cap companies with high quality and focused institutional investors while creating a framework for best practices. Before we begin, one final item. I want to remind everyone that Lobe is available for one-on-one meetings later this week. If you have not signed up, please send me an email at Breza, B-R-E-Z-A, at lythampartners.com or visit www.lythampartners.com/virtual and click on the one-on-one meeting request button. With that said, let me now turn the presentation over to Philip Young, CEO of Lobe Sciences. Philip, please go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Thanks to the company Lytham for inviting us, and I look forward to updating everybody on Lobe Sciences, where we are and where we plan to be by the end of this year. It's an exciting story, and I think a story that is just now getting the attention it deserves. So before we go, I will alert you that I will be making some forward-looking statements. All of our filings are current in Canada and the US, so please proceed to the platform you prefer if you would like to get more information from our public filings. So what is Lobe? What are we doing? Well, we're a biotechnology company focused on transforming psychedelic medicines to benefit patients of all ages. Specifically, we're researching and engaged in studying the 5-HT2A receptor. That's a very important receptor in the brain. It controls a lot of synaptic signaling, functioning, and you'll see as we move forward that we do plan to develop revolutionary drugs. We want to deliver novel therapeutics to treat and potentially cure a brain and mental health disease. And we're going to do this by identifying transformative new medicines and repurposing existing medicines or psychedelics. And psychedelics, quickly, a summary of what they are. They're different drugs you've heard of throughout time. Psilocybin, magic mushroom is one we're focused on. All of them do one thing. They regulate serotonin. Serotonin is a mood regulator. Creates happiness, creates anxiety, and the psychedelics across the board all target and stimulate serotonin receptors, which is the 5-HT2A. Psychedelics have a very long history for personal use, recreational use, as well as purposefully self-driven therapeutic use all the way back to 5000 BC. Come forward to last year and the year before, where localities in North America, principally in the US, are decriminalizing psychedelics. That's great for recreational users, but that's not our business model. Our business model is creating pharmaceutical products that are useful and treat very specific indications. We follow the regulatory guidelines from the FDA and regulators around the world. We're focused on mild traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder, 2 very, very serious issues, diseases humans around the world deal with. And the reason we're focused on that is there's no approved treatment anywhere. The FDA has never approved a treatment for traumatic brain injury or concussion, as it's more commonly heard of. What happens when somebody gets a concussion or traumatic brain injury? Well, they're told to go home and take it easy and they'll get better. Treat the symptoms as they occur. If they can't deal with light, they have light sensitivity, they're told to go into a dark room. If they have headaches, they're told to take over-the-counter pain medicine. All that said, 40% of the people, 40% of the millions of people who suffer traumatic brain injury develop post-traumatic stress disorder, principally because of the unrealized relief of symptoms. Everyone goes into it thinking they're going to get better, and a large portion do not get better and they develop post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a vicious cycle and one we hope to impact on and improve the patient outcomes. The market opportunities from the investor standpoint, this is exciting. The opportunity for PTSD is very, very large, probably one of the largest market opportunities in any industry, pharmaceutical industry. $16 trillion by 2030 is the estimated global market opportunity for PTSD. And it's an amazing statistic, but approximately 10% of the people living will suffer from PTSD, and that number is going up due to the pandemic. The market opportunity for traumatic brain injury, in and of itself, it's a very large market. 69 million people worldwide have a TBI and every year. Just imagine that year on year on year. And 40% of them do not develop any resolution and develop PTSD. CDC, the US CDC, says that approximately 5.3 million US citizens, 2% of the population, are living with disability brought on by traumatic brain injury. They're both very addressable markets, very easily identified markets, and markets in great need of therapeutic intervention. Psychedelics have been segmented out, as I look at it, in 4 specific areas. On the left, recreational consumer use. We're not focused on the recreational use of psychedelics. People are well aware of that, and they can access the mushrooms and the other drugs as they choose. Hallucinogenic treatment, that is a very small, in our mind, specific way of developing therapeutic treatment. That's not what we're focused on with our therapeutic intervention. The Chrysalis system we'll talk about in a few minutes is going to be beneficial there, but as far as confining a patient to a clinic for 8 to 12 hours, having a psychedelic dose of drugs is not our business model. We believe that identifying the highest non-psychedelic inducing dose of drugs dosed at home is the largest market opportunity for patients globally. Treating patients where they work and live is the important piece of our strategy. Microdosing is an overused word. We'll be the first company via clinical studies this year to really identify what the microdose is. How high of a dose can we give without inducing a psychedelic trip or hallucination? Combine that with the Chrysalis system for not only treating with psychedelic therapy, but also in treating patients via virtual reality. So the serotonin receptor activation, I won't go too deep into the science, and we can talk about it later if it's of interest. But basically, you activate this receptor, and it results in an expression of key genes that are involved in creating synaptic function. Stimulate this receptor, you have better intra-brain communication, as seen in this slide here. This is a very important study which identifies the true impact of how a psychedelic dose, a drug, can help rewire the brain and help improve the brain, or it's called reset the brain. The placebo on the left, you can see it's a normal rat. They've got some decent signaling going on, but you give them some psilocybin and you look at the increased communication, if you will, within the brain. The neuroimaging shows that the connectivity in the brain is increased, the activity is increased, and this correlates with positive subject reports and brain function. More importantly, this has been identified as lasting for periods of months. Very important important factor in what we've learned about psilocybin specifically. One other not very well understood or appreciated component of the psychedelics is dosing them gives an anti-inflammatory product, and it creates an anti-inflammatory situation. The psychedelics have been shown to have anti-inflammatory effects by inhibiting tumor necrosis factor, which is a pro-inflammatory protein that happens, especially in the response to trauma. And also it's thought that the psychedelics reduce inflammation in and of themselves by targeting the IL-6 receptor. Very important way to treat any disease or disorder in the brain. There's almost always inflammatory process associated with it, whether we're talking TBI, PTSD, the combination, you'll have inflammation. So we believe that by harnessing the anti-inflammatory activity as well as the improved brain signaling with the psychedelic combined with a product known as NAC, N-acetylcysteine. This is our IP, is built around the combination of these products. NAC is a dietary supplement that was originally approved as a drug for treating acetaminophen overdose. Back when Tylenol was first introduced, people were taking too much of it. The FDA approved this as an antidote so that people wouldn't ruin their livers. NAC is an antioxidant. It's thought to reduce DNA damage. And it's marketed up now as a liver protective, as a healthy immune system support. And it's been used now in several studies for brain trauma. One study out of Iraq in blast patients, soldiers who suffered blast wounds. Half the group got NAC, half the group didn't get NAC after the appropriate time and data gathering. The group who received NAC statistically significantly better outcomes across the board than the group that didn't receive NAC. So we believe that combining the anti-inflammatory and plasticity-inducing properties of a psychedelic with the potent antioxidant and cellular protective properties of NAC, we should have a superior therapeutic regimen. So far, it looks that way from the data generated with our partnership at University of Miami. The preclinical data demonstrated that the combination of psilocybin and NAC was significantly better than either one alone. Quick summary, a light-dark box is a well-validated experiment where rats are placed in a dark box and they naturally seek the lighted side. If they feel good, they're going to go out, they're going to explore, they're going to spend time in the light. Rats who don't feel good, specifically rats who have had a brain trauma or have PTSD, stay in the dark, they hide. And what did we find? If you see on the far left side, highly statistically significant improvement in the rats who received both psilocybin and NAC combination. So much greater than either product by itself or the vehicle, which is a placebo. I've been in the business a long time, and anytime you have a p-value with that many zeros ahead of the 5, then this is something that is truly a positive outcome and an outcome that's not by chance. This combination achieved what we thought it would and what our IP says it does, a better outcome for these animals. And we believe this will transfer into patients. I mentioned our IP. We have significant number of patents going through the process in the PCT stage. The initial reports have come out, and they're all very positive. Adding that data to those patent applications, I'm sure we believe will give us the opportunity to have long-term protection of our dosing regimen. All of this happens with a company that is very well connected. We'll talk about Chrysalis Innovations, our collaboration with virtual psychedelics. We call it MedTech for the metaverse. It's very important. You mentioned University of Miami and the animal data, but also the NFL Alumni Association and WBA. Very important to understand long-term consequences of brain trauma. And both of those organizations are dealing with that right now. And we're going to be working with them to help identify, codify, and work on therapeutic regimens for their athletes. And finally, Ionic Brands. They acquired our cannabis asset last year, providing us with a long runway of non-dilutive capital for the company. So Chrysalis Innovations. Chrysalis Innovations is developing what we're calling the Chrysalis pod or the Chrysalis system. It will help manage patients in the setting, in the environment of an office for therapeutic counseling. Currently, patients are doing virtual reality using a headset, which is tethered to a computer a lot of times and is very cumbersome and difficult to deal with. This is going to go far beyond that. Patients are going to be able to comfortably recline and have a fully immersive experience with the screen that's going to have capabilities for biometric measuring. So we'll be able to manage and track the patient's data real time. This will be very important in the combination of virtual reality with psychedelic therapy. Dr. Skip Rizzo, who is one of the thought leaders globally in that combination, especially for soldiers and frontline responders, has been doing this for quite a while. And we believe this is a very important application for the Chrysalis pod. We think it's important. Additionally to that, when we can talk about this later, Rob, is that we think that when you apply the Chrysalis system to other counseling software, to other content, which the FDA has been approving for anxiety, patients can comfortably sit in the office and go through these counseling sessions virtually. Eventually, we think this is going to find its way into the private sector, people's homes for gaming, as well as real-time counseling, virtual reality, and augmented reality. It's a phenomenal opportunity. So quickly, where are we going this year? Well, we're going into human studies. We can talk more about this later. It's very important. We're taking the data we know from the animals and going into our first human studies in the second half of the year. We'll be identifying the proper dose and moving that into a phase 2 protocol in 2023. We can't do it without manufacturing. We have in hand a wonderful manufacturing agreement, which is going to give us access to all the drugs we're going to need for our human clinical studies, as well as commercial, as well as new chemical entities. We can talk further about that. We'll file our IND, which is a mandatory step with the FDA so that we can do human studies here in the US. And Chrysalis Innovations is going to deliver the first working prototype second quarter of this year. A lot of things happening with the company, a lot of positive inflection points, and we're very happy about it. But we're not letting go of the other opportunities that need and target the 5-HT2A receptor. As you see, all of these market opportunities, they have the same thing in common, is that receptor is at the key of finding a therapeutic regimen. And as we develop our manufacturing capacities through our partner and develop new chemical entities, we can target the receptors with long-term patent protection and a novel entity for treating these conditions. Our team is great. We can talk about this further. A lot of experience developing drugs, bringing them to the market. Our advisors, once again, are some of the best in the industry, going with Dr. Mark Geyer, who was one of the original thought leaders in the psychedelic space back in the 60s. And it's hard to believe he's been working in the space since then. Probably one of the most knowledgeable people, as well as Bart Oates from the NFL and Gilberto from the World Boxing Association. We have a very straightforward cap structure, no debt, no derivatives, straight common shares out. We plan to keep it this way. So 2022 is a transformational year for us. We'll complete the transition to a virtually integrated biotech company, developing and discovering new drugs, initiate our human clinical studies. That's very important, and it's a great milestone for the company, and continue our toxin PK data. And we'll continue developing our manufacturing capabilities, psilocybin and its derivatives we'll talk about. We'll work with Chrysalis, but continually we'll focus on driving shareholder value, ethically building superior therapeutics to improve brain and mental health. That's our mission. That's what we're going to do, and you'll see our results as the year goes by. So with that, I'll thank you for your attention, and I look forward to answering any questions from Rob.
Great. Phil, thank you very much for the overview. A few questions. You talked a lot about dosing. Can you take us through the approach of developing psychedelics, the dosing strategy of psilocybin, the patients, and how I know it's important. Obviously, you don't want to overdose somebody. So it's clearly a crux that you've got to cross and help people understand.
Sure.
So if you expand on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, traditionally, up until now, really up until we started focusing on our dosing regimen, traditional psychedelics have been dosed at a high level, 25 to 30 milligrams for patients who then go on a psychedelic trip. They have the hallucinatory trip, and they need to be confined with a one-on-one counseling session for 8 to 12 hours in an office. That's great for some very severe PTSD and treatment-resistant depression. But what we believe is treating patients where they work, live, and play is the right way to do it. And you can't do that by inducing a hallucinatory experience. So we plan to, through our human studies this year, identify the highest non-hallucinatory dose of psilocybin, or its the drug that it becomes. When psilocybin's dosed, it becomes psilocin, or straight psilocin, that doesn't induce hallucination, and then dose that over 5 to 7 days. So the patient can take the drug at home, take it at a clinic if they're going to the emergency room, but they get to take the drug. We believe that creating a global pharmaceutical market, you need to have the patients take the drugs where they're used to it. And physicians, primary care, family practice, even pediatricians want to maintain control of their patients and monitor their patients' treatment. They can do it by treating the patients at home. So we're very excited about this opportunity. We think it's a very, very large global market opportunity, and it's traditional pharmaceutical market.
Great. I think that's really critical and important. I'd love to have you expand a little bit more on the Chrysalis forward thinking. Obviously, that's a huge opportunity for you guys, first mover advantage, et cetera, et cetera. Can you expand a little bit about how you see that working? Or there's obviously multiple different routes to market. Would love to understand how you're placing your bets, I guess.
Yes. So we partnered with a group out of LA called Virtual Psychedelics. They're led by, I mentioned his name, Dr. Skip Rizzo from UCLA. Dr. Rizzo is the preeminent thought leader across the globe in using virtual reality in treating patients with PTSD. You combine his expertise with Brett Leonard. Brett Leonard is a Hollywood producer and futurist, first guy to ever use virtual reality in a movie. And they've built a team of industry-leading experts from artificial intelligence and all the way to engineering. And what we plan to do is a multi-stage program that will develop, first off, the Chrysalis pod. I mentioned it earlier. Patients will be able to comfortably recline in a situation where they'll be fully immersed, surrounded by a screen. And the screen will be able to monitor their heart rate, their breathing, their eye movements, all the biometric data you want, blood pressure. And that will help while patients are re-going through or re-experiencing something that may have caused them PTSD. And there's all kinds of things that cause people to have that experience. And we think that's important, used with or without psychedelic medicine. So psychedelic medicine and the Chrysalis is just a small piece of it. More and more companies are developing content for use in virtual sessions with patients. The FDA has approved several component content for treating anxiety via virtual reality and via remote telemedicine. We believe we're just at the forefront of that, and our plan is to create a system that is industry leading 10 years from now. So as I've mentioned, we have some of the best names in technology and the futurists looking at this so that we have something that will apply today and be applicable 10 years from now. And we think that as this moves forward, these pods, as we originally called it, would be rolled out into psychiatry offices, into general practice offices, and eventually into people's private residence. They'll be useful for counseling sessions. We had new content being created all the time. They'll also be useful for gaming and other personal recreational uses.
One thing you mentioned during the presentation was the ability to control the contract in your manufacturing. You expressed a few minutes ago the ability to control it. How for investors, most of this is going to be new to them. How do you procure psilocybin, if I pronounce it correctly? But how are you working with your manufacturing, your sourcing? This is probably fairly new to most investors. So if you could just take a step back and walk us through that, that'd be awesome.
Well, what happened last summer, the summer of 2021, North America ran into a severe shortage of psilocybin. There was none to be had by anybody. We saw this as an opportunity to solidify our position as a leading company. Through long established relationships, having been in the industry as long as I have and my team have, we reached out to a private manufacturing company, a very large one, but a private company. They made psilocybin for us in 5 weeks. We expanded that into an exclusive arrangement where not only will they be manufacturing psilocybin, they'll be manufacturing other chemical entities that target the 5-HT2A receptor, the serotonin receptor, if you will. And that's going to put us in a position, and in fact, it's put us in a position that very few companies are in right now. We have total control of the supply chain of our manufactured drugs, starting with psilocybin, going to MDMA, derivatives of psilocybin, such as psilocin, along with new chemical entities that will target the receptor. So we now have a pipeline of therapeutic opportunity for as long as we want to keep developing drugs.
That's fantastic. What do you think investors really misunderstand? I think you've done a great job with the presentation today, talking about some of the key highlights. What do you think investors really don't get? I mean, I know it's a pivotal year, but yeah, that'd be great.
Well, what happened is the whole psychedelic vortex took everybody down. The entire psych index was really crushed last year. There was a lot of get up and go in the late 2020, early 21, and then things started coming down, and the whole market segment came down. We got drawn down with that, unfortunately. What I don't think people fully understand was because we were building out the plan last year was how advanced we are right now and how we're ready to set the target for other companies to achieve. We're all experienced drug developers. In the industry, you'll find a lot of people in executive management positions, which are great people. They have good intention, but they haven't developed drugs before. We have a leg up because we're very experienced at that. And we now have solidified all the plans that we need to. We have the CROs in place. We have the manufacturing in place. We have protocols ready to go. So this is a transformational year for the company, and where our stock price is sitting right now, I think it's the most undervalued company in the psychedelic sector.
That's great. Maybe from an educational perspective, Phil, if you could add like, what is it working in the current regulatory environment that we're in today? And how has that maybe changed over the last year? And what do you expect from a regulatory perspective, maybe going forward as well? Love to just get your perspective on that.
Yeah, that's a great question, because as I alluded to in the presentation, there's several paths. The path of decriminalizing psychedelic drugs for personal use recreationally, principally, is one path, and that's okay. But those compounds people are taking, they're not GMP, good manufacturing process. They're not FDA vetted, regulated. They're just using them for whatever they are, and there's no way to really tell a safety profile. What we're doing is really following the FDA, and the FDA is very receptive to the repurposing now of these age-old products. It's interesting that in the 1960s, Sandoz, which if you're old enough, you'll remember Sandoz, a drug company, marketed a psilocybin tablet in the United States, and its indication was for generalized anxiety. What happened was they developed a lot of data, they put the drug on the market, and FDA eventually made them take it off the market because they realized people were using it for recreational purposes. But the FDA now realizes that the only new innovations in mental health have come with the antidepressants, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And there's been nothing really revolutionary and new in that sector. It's all redoing the same old thing over and over again. And everyone who understands the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors understand that their efficacy is pretty marginal, to be honest. And what we have, and the FDA is excited about it, is a way to do something that they've wanted to do, which is target that receptor. And now what we're going to be doing is not only targeting that receptor to get the benefits of the stimulation, we're targeting that receptor also at the right spot so that we don't have a hallucinatory experience. Having a trip recreationally is one thing. Having to have a trip just to get therapy, I think, is a totally different animal, and people would prefer not to have that.
Sure, no, that makes perfect sense. Phil, I want to say thank you very much for your time today. We're going to wrap it up here. Greatly appreciate your time. To anyone out there who has not already signed up for a one-on-one again, please send me an email at Breza, B-R-E-Z-A, @lythampartners.com, or again, select www.lythampartners, L-Y-T-H-A-M, partners with an S.com/virtual, and click on the one-on-one meeting request. With that, we hope you all enjoy a great conference. Thank you very much. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, guys.